Good afternoon. Welcome to today's edition of the Coal Scene. Today we're going to be talking generally about the state of the coal industry. We'll also explore some of the various developments that are going on within the industry. And joining me today on the set is Bill Rainey, President of the West Virginia Coal Association, who's here to just provide us with just a general overview of the industry and some of the things that are going on. Bill, thanks so much for taking time to join us here
I appreciate being here, Chris, as always.
Looking forward to hearing from you. Looking forward to some of your thoughts of some of the things that are going on around the industry. Probably a pretty good place to start is just a general overview of some of the production trends, some of the things that are going on, some of the things that you personally and the association you represent are involved with.
Well, last night I looked at the production records that rolled it up through last week, and we as a state are running behind about 7.5%. And the northern part of West Virginia is down less than southern West Virginia. And as so many times we've talked about, it's like a perfect storm, it seems like. We had a very mild winter, one of the mildest on record, so the burn was down. You got natural gas prices hovering around $2, which is cheaper than it's been in years. You got this permitting problem with EPA and the federal government and not allowing permits to be issued as frequently as they should. And then you just got the overall economy. The economy here in West Virginia is stronger than it is in other places, but when you don't have industrial facilities pulling on the grid, then you don't use nearly as much electricity. So all that having been said, that's the negative side of it. The positive side is the fact that we still got a strong export market. And the amazing thing is that people, the other countries, we as a country, America, has more coal than anybody else in the world, but yet all these other countries are the ones that are wanting our coal. So what we got to do is get it to Newport News and Curtis Bay and Baltimore and New Orleans, and get it to China and get it to India and get it to Germany, who is turning back to coal after they're shutting some of their nukes down. So the positive side is the world market, and hopefully that's going to continue.
You make a good point. I read somewhere recently, I can't recall the exact percentage, but the world use of coal has increased and is increasing, while the amount of coal that's burned, consumed here within the United States has been relatively flat.
That is true. It's stayed pretty flat, right around 1 billion tons, a little better than that. We mine it, use most of it here. And the world, though, they talk about coal being the fastest growing fossil fuel in the world. And China is, they're out kicking their coverage way extreme in terms of the needs of the coal that they have for power generation as well as metallurgical purposes. And India, they say, is every bit as strong, although it's still a little bit less mature than what China is. So an analyst referred to it the other day as China being in the third inning of a baseball game or in the coal game, and India is literally in the first inning. So when you look at the demand that has increased so much in China and think about that same demand trend going in India, then the absolute need for our coal is so great. So we've got to keep that going. And of course we have the best metallurgical coal in the world, southern West Virginia, some of northern app coal. And it's going to be a challenge to the infrastructure to get it to the ports.
The quality of the coal, the metallurgical coal that you mentioned, coupled with with West Virginia's proximity to the export areas, to the ports themselves, should allow the state of West Virginia, I'm presuming, to stay very active as one of the leading export states in the country. That export market should remain fairly active for some time.
Well, I hope that's the case. I mean, certainly all the analysts feel that way. They think it's certainly lending itself to that. They get the European situation straightened out, and You know, of course, we ship a lot of coal to the Ukraine, to Russia. They make steel out of it. It's just amazing to me that, you know, everybody else wants our coal, but we have difficulty today selling it here in America. And we have difficulty mining it, very frankly, in a predictable fashion. And that's why it's becoming so dramatic with the layoffs that we're seeing. And when the price was strong in a domestic market, then you were able to continue to operate on permits that have been issued a number of years ago. And when that happens, your costs go up so much because you're operating where you had not planned to operate. So today they were operating in areas that are much more expensive. The costs are high, and so what's happening when the price depresses, then you know you end up having to make cutbacks and try to get yourself into some coal that is cost efficient as it regards the market.
I heard or read recently where the amount of coal or the volume of coal that's on the ground in this country equals more than what we as a state produce over a year's time, or in excess of 150 to almost 200 million tons of coal.
That's what they all say. You know, everybody talks about being at record levels, and very few of them quantify that. But those few that do quantify it indicate about 100 days of coal on the ground for the facilities that are using it, the power plants and the industrial facilities. So you think about it, if they crank up today and they're using as much as they possibly can use, you probably got about 3 months before it finally gets down to where they're running on bare ground again. But this weather helps. The weather we're in toward the end of June here is really good. We love drastic weather, as you well know. I mean, if it stayed 98 degrees till December, it'd be a good thing for the coal industry.
So I guess the bad news, or if you were looking at the glass being half empty,
right.
There's a lot of things that's converging on the industry here at the same time. The perfect storm, as you say. The weather, you know, some of the regulatory agendas that seem to be working against coal as a base fuel. You know, there's a lot of availability or an abundance of natural gas at low prices. So there's a lot of things that's cutting in or causing the state to you know, experience a little bit of a sluggish period. We're seeing some layoffs, but if you were to look at that as you know, as the glass being half full, you know, we still have a pretty vibrant industry, and it's, you know, it seems to be, you know, a smaller in scale, but it's still pretty vibrant, and you know, some of those the export market ought to remain strong, and so it's still a viable industry within the state. It still generates a lot of jobs, a lot of taxes.
Well, it does. I mean, it's a tremendous amount. You know, last year they did about $500 million in severance tax alone to the general revenue funds. And I try to point out to other groups when we get with them that the diminishment of the coal industry in West Virginia is very severe. And if you want to think about how severe it is, then think about who in the business community, who in the businesses in this state are going to make up $500 million when we quit producing coal at the price that they're selling it at 6 months ago. And that's frankly one of the problems we're running into, is the fact that the volume is down, expected to be about 10% off this year. So the volume's down, but also the price is down. Now, the last few years the volume's come down, and we've lost about 15% in the last 4 years. But yet the price has stayed up, so it's made up for that in terms of the severance tax collections, because it's based on the selling price. So when you got a high price and a low volume, it becomes invisible to the policymakers. And that's, of course, one of the things that we struggle with each day, to make sure people understand that we're moving into a real treacherous area here, where we've got to be very, very careful and try to figure out what the incentives are to begin to make our coal, once again, competitive with the coal that's moving out there.
I know a few years ago we used the figure that we were consistently mining 160, 165 million tons a year.
Right.
And I think that held true over the, towards the the latter part of the mid 90s, latter part of the 90s, up until 3 or 4 years ago. And so that was a number, 160, 165 million tons. And there was some fluctuation in that. I think we hit 175, 180 million tons mid 90s, and a couple times it was little in the low 160s.
Right.
But that seems to be changing. It seems like we're on a little bit of a downward trend from that time.
Well, we are. I think in 2008 we did about 161 million, and since that time, last year for instance, we did 138, and the anticipation is it will be down about to 130, maybe 128 million this year. So we're losing that volume. Variety of reasons for that. One, of course, is the permitting thing. I keep coming back to that because it's so troublesome. In the sense that the federal government will not release its hold on the state or the industry to allow permits to flow in the certain patterns that they should, so as to meet the reliability that the operators and the planners feel like they need to meet the market demands. So that's one of the problems. And then of course we've mined about 14 billion tons in this state since we've been keeping records, since we've been a state, which is 149 years ago. And we've got about 50 billion remaining according to the Geologic Survey. But as most people know, it's a more difficult situation in terms of infrastructure to access the seam. The seams, the separation technologies, the prep plants are so much better. So what we're doing is retrieving less coal for each ton that comes out of the ground because the cleaning technologies are so very good. So what happens is you've got a diminishment there. The seams are thinner, they're more difficult to mine. It takes more people, as everybody understands, that we've got more people working today in the industry before the layoff pattern started than we have in a number of years, and that's a good thing. And that's what we were planning on. As you well know, we talked to a number of people and said we needed 2,000 people about 8 months ago to sustain our industry. Well, and then all of the perfect storm came about. So we still have more people working than we have in recent times, and that's a great thing. But the reason is because the seams are more difficult to mine, they're thinner, and it's more of a challenge to it. So we're still looking for people.
So as a state, we've lost some of the efficiencies that we were able to benefit from.
We have
some of the efficiencies. We're now, as you say, into some higher ratios on surface, and the permitting process is creating, remaining and not sequencing the operations as efficiently as you otherwise would. So that there's no question that's a huge issue. Seems to be a lot of stress when you talk to miners, and we do regularly. It just seems to be a lot of stress within the households today about whether or not those jobs are going to be sustained. Whether people listen to the news, they read the newspaper, and there's just a lot of concern out there right now over whether or not we're going to be able to sustain the 19,000 mining jobs that we have going into the future here.
Well, it's a huge concern, as you can imagine, when your job's on the line, and I think the frustrating part, at least from our standpoint, is the fact that it's typically something you can't do anything about. I mean, it's the federal government not giving a permit, or it's closing down a power plant with too aggressive a rule, an impossible rule to comply with. You're taking the market away. The federal government's taking, where we send our coal. And it's things that we ourselves, nor the miners, can do anything about. We can change it with the policymakers, and hopefully that will occur as we move through the next several months. But it's going to be very troublesome. And as you say, we've talked to a lot of them, and they are concerned, as they should be, because what's happening is it seems like there's a big cloud around coal right now. But yet, you look at 98 degrees today, and hopefully it's going to stay that way for a while. it's going to strain the grid, I think, and we're going to begin to see a real need for reliable, low-cost electricity. You know, the other ones that seem to be missing a lot of this, that we're trying to get the point across, are the people that are on fixed incomes. And the fact that all of this stuff that's happening to us is going to end up costing them more. What they're doing to the power plants, what they're doing to the cost of mining, what they're doing to removing the certainty from allowing us to progress as we want to, raises the cost of mining, raises the cost of fuel, and thereby raises the cost of electricity. Cheap natural gas is here, but there's not a great deal of confidence among those that know a lot more than I do as to whether it will stay at that price or not. When that price increases and the people that have switched, the electricity prices are going to go through the roof. The ones that pay the penalty are you and I and everyone else that gets an electric bill. And I really am concerned about those that are on fixed income, and all of a sudden you get an electric bill that's twice or 3 times what you're used to paying. And it's going to be very, very troubling for them.
Couple that with the high price of gasoline, you know, it makes household energy, you know, factoring in or incorporating transportation energy as part of that household budget.
And you think about that. I mean, transportation energy, the gasoline, the diesel fuel, but then the price of electricity goes up, and there's not very much I know of you make around here that you go down to the local store and buy that doesn't require some electricity. And so the price of everything is going to go up, and that's troublesome in these really struggling economic times.
Well, and I think one of the things to extract from that is, particularly with the middle and low income, there's still a fixed energy cost, and that's part of that household budget. And you know, the percentage that energy consumes out of that budget goes up dramatically as the income for the household tends to trend downward.
That's exactly right. I read somewhere it was like for middle and low income, whatever those thresholds are, they talked about the energy portion of that is about 35% of their income, I think. And you know, if those prices go up and take a bigger chunk, then it's going to squeeze everybody.
Well, we've always, because of the state being so predominantly coal-fired in terms of its electricity, we have always benefited from one of the lowest utility rates, one of the lowest electric rates found anywhere in the country. I think there's a couple hydro states out in the Northwest, and maybe another state that's predominantly coal-fired.
That's right.
That's ahead of West Virginia. But I've noticed here the last year or so, you know, the price even here is beginning to creep upwards a little bit.
Well, and you know, it's almost an invisible cost, and that's what I'm saying. The people that need to be tremendously concerned are those that are retired on fixed incomes, and it's all this hardware that they've had to put on, they've been required to put on, which is okay, it cleans up the air, but with that comes a price, and a tremendous amount of capital that these power plants have invested in terms of meeting the Clean Air Act raises the cost of our electricity. And as you say, it's gone from like a nickel a kilowatt hour, I think, up to about 8 cents a kilowatt hour now, and still we're about a half or maybe a third of what they're paying in New York and other states. And I just shudder to think about what it would be if all of a sudden we were paying 18 or 20 cents a kilowatt hour. It would be devastating.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question about that. And it's just not household; it's also industrial power that goes up or down commensurate with the amount of coal that's in that burn. Yeah. A lot of talk about renewables. Where are renewables today? How do they fit in? You know, natural gas is catching a lot of attention, but it's a fossil fuel. But we still hear so much about windmills and solar and, you know, biofuels. What percentage do they collectively account for?
I think you know, they're nudging maybe 1% or maybe a little higher than that nationwide. Here in West Virginia, I don't think it's nearly that much. There's probably more wind power here, but whether it's credited to West Virginia or not, the windmills are here, but whether the utilities are counting that against what they generate here or generate in another state, I'm not certain about, but it's a very minimal percentage, and if you attempted to run the grid on renewables, we'd already be in a blackout situation.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question about that. But yet you hear so much about windmills and solar, and maybe their day will come, but it's just not here yet. I don't think that your average person realizes how much energy we use as a city, a state, a nation, a world, and how that percentage, or and how that energy unit is expected to do nothing but increase going forward over the years.
Well, and you think about, I mean, I'm spoiled from the standpoint of electricity. I think we all are, and we almost think it's an entitlement. That everybody's entitled to electricity, and when you flip a switch, it's supposed to come on. But
it better.
Yeah, you hope it does. Either blame the power company, or we'll end up getting blamed somewhere along the line with that. But it's unbelievable how much we depend on electricity, and you don't realize that until it does go off. And then when it goes off for a little while, then you just figure, man, oh man, I never thought about all those things depending on electricity. But renewables can't do it. I mean, when you look at what they're doing, and I think I heard yesterday that the 4th alternative energy factory that were making either solar panels or windmills went into bankruptcy. And one of the reasons was given was the fact that they'd gotten all these government grants to do that. And now all of a sudden they were having to play on a level field, subject to market, and they simply couldn't make it. So it's, I guess the only thing the coal industry is really looking for is a level playing field. Give us a level playing field, and our people will be able to, because we got the best coal miners and the best managers who deal with weather, they deal with geology, they deal with topography, they deal with all kinds of changing regulatory environments. But give them a level playing field, and they'll meet the challenges as they have done over the years. And we've done a pretty good job of staying second in this nation of producing coal.
I will forever be taken back from a couple years ago when we saw a national stimulus package making its way through Congress, and it was eventually enacted. And but yet everybody here involved with the state's coal industry said we don't need a handout, we don't need a stimulus, we just need a business permit.
Yeah.
We just need the right to go to work.
That's exactly right. I think Senator Manchin was leading the charge on that in his days of when he was just getting ready to head to the Senate, and that was and that's still the case. I mean, every day you struggle with the permits, the authorities to go to work where you want to go to work, knowing that that's what we planned 3 or 4 years ago, and thinking that the market is going to be in the situation that it's in. And they have styled all of these operations. Most people, I think, figure out that there's not much planning that goes into a coal mine, but when you go into an underground mine, as far as I'm concerned, there is not a greater engineering marvel. And you've got to plan those years in advance. You've got to ventilate it. You've got to create the transportation system. You've got roof control. You've got all of these things that you've got to think about. And you can't just suddenly tomorrow decide you're going to go mine a ton of coal and put it on the railroad or in a barge somewhere. So it takes a huge amount of planning. And
well, people that have taken tours of our underground or surface facilities here in West Virginia have just marveled at the technological development and all the modernization of our mines and mining facilities here within West Virginia. And I also know that people come from all over the world. We have visitors every week here, as you well know, that want to talk to our engineers, our mine operators, our political leadership, because they want to find out and learn from how we're doing it, so they can take back all that knowledge and know-how.
They do. They come to observe not only the mining process, but they come to observe the environmental control process and the stewardship that's involved. And another thing that I always like to talk about is our fact that the people that we represent, and again, they're the best coal miners in the world, but they're the best environmentalists in the world, because they're out there planting grass, controlling water, they're making sure that everything is in compliance not only with the law, but with the way they want it to be done, because they're living in the vicinity of where they hunted as a child, fished as a child, and they want their children and grandchildren to enjoy the same things that they did. So they're not going to do anything to spoil their environment. I've never heard a coal miner say that I want dirty air, dirty water.
Yeah.
And that's just simply not going to happen. So we're going to we do a great job of protecting the environment for everyone, from that matter. And that's just what's got to happen. But you're right, they come from all over the world to see that. They see the safety practices that we have, which are remarkable. But just the technology of underground mining, of moving dirt to get to the coal on the surface, there's nothing to compare to it anywhere in this world.
Well, and I also just want to talk briefly here about post-mine land development. You know, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, that was a hot topic. That was very controversial. And today, as you look around the state, there's example after example of post-mine land development. Whether it's the Cabela's up in Wheeling, the city of Weirton, which has a new medical facility. Just this past fall, we opened up a brand new high school in Mingo County on a former mine land site. Just seems like that planning is much more proficient in all here today.
Well, they're building the 4-lane highways through Mingo and McDowell County, and they're coordinating that with the mining operations. So we can move the dirt, get the coal out of the ground, and reclaim it the way the highway department feels like it needs to be done, and save the federal government millions and millions of dollars. And it's that very road that runs by the beautiful Mingo Central High School. And if anybody gets the opportunity, they ought to go take a look at that, because it's a state-of-the-art educational facility. And it's in a beautiful, beautiful environment down there. And it's got a great 4-lane highway running right by it. And this is the road that's supposed to run eventually from Detroit to Myrtle Beach. And it's going to open that whole part of the country up. But we're having, again, difficulty getting the permits that are going to allow that road to extend, which is just remarkable to me. But we have the Department of Defense, we have the National Guard working with operators all over the state to create what they call Fort West Virginia. And they're training young men to not only save their lives, but to save other people's lives and defend this nation.
I know that I was recently looking at something. They have a new facility in Clay County in conjunction with one of the mines there, and I think one down by the Memorial Tunnel as well.
They do. It's a drop zone up in Clay County where the people in the 130th Air Wing here can learn